Do you think more professional athletes should be investing in startups?
I think more athletes should be spending the time to go and learn about what it takes to invest in startups. And then also taking the time to learn about the history behind the industry.
So important.
The same way in which we learn about the histories behind our game, whether that be football, basketball, baseball, hockey, NASCAR, F1, tennis. Take the time to also go learn about the histories behind the markets and the ecosystems that you want to be in. So for me, it's studying the private markets. And by studying the private markets, it's allowed me to be informed about where capital is flowing, who's managing that capital. So I can walk you through different histories within our game, and those can inform exactly how decisions are made, how a team is built, how an organization is constructed.
Success breeds success. Today, I'm joined by Kelvin Beachum, offensive tackle for the Arizona Cardinals and two-time Walter Payton Man of the Year Award nominee. Kelvin was a Forbes 30 Under 30, not only for his work in the NFL, but also his investment prowess in the venture capital industry and his nonprofit work across both STEM and solving world hunger. Kelvin Beachum, venture capitalist, tackle for the Arizona Cardinals. Welcome to Change Order.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to take us back for a second. We met when I was 26. I was working for Mark Gerson. We had launched a program that was a mentor network between high net worths and pro athletes. You had just signed with the New York Jets. Part of that program was like executive coaching, like readings, networking goals, like financial goals. But it wasn't really Mark that was doing that stuff with you. It was me. Why the heck were you listening to me at the time?
One, I hadn't received coaching to that extent, first and foremost. I'm a big believer that when you're doing something with somebody that is your peer or somebody that you feel equal to, you have the ability to do life with them. And I look back at those times and those conversations, we had the ability to do life with one another. You knew some things that I didn't know. I knew some things that you didn't know. And we were able really to show each other some of the, best in class opportunities from our ecosystems and learnings from our ecosystems, which I think have helped us both as we've continued to scale our careers in, prospective ecosystems.
I think if it weren't for you, I probably would never have herded cows or gone hunting. So I would agree with that.
Without question, man. I look at those pictures from time to time. We need to get back out and do it again.
I agree. So, when we met, you started to invest in startups. And as I mentioned, there were a lot of times where you were going out and you were networking and you were meeting new people. How did it feel being the person in the room that really didn't know a lot, coming from somebody who was in the NFL and probably had a ton of confidence in the other room?
I think first and foremost, it was humbling. I would say that it's still humbling because there are areas that I don't know. There are people that I don't know. There are rooms that historically athletes have never been in. There are conversations that I've now been a part of that I know historically athletes have never had the opportunity to take part in. So even then, the way in which I feel then and the way in which I feel now is still geared towards I have to go improve myself all over again. I get to go be a rookie all over again. And I think for me, that's what is so special about this particular industry is because there is no pinnacle. There is no particular destination. There is this, as Frank Gans, one of my former coaches, would say, ongoing skill and technique development. That's currently what's going on when I come into this profession. And as I've spent more time in this profession, there is ongoing skills and technique development that are happening in the way in which I talk, the vernacular that's used in this industry, the way in which I add value, the way in which I talk to customers, the way in which I interact with other investors, the way in which I interact with other GPs, founders, what have you, is continuing to iterate and continuing to learn and evolve. And I think for me, that's been what's been fun, but also the feelings that come with this is causing me to reinvent myself and start at the bottom and work my way up on a consistent basis.
And when you walk into those rooms, how do you prep for a meeting?
A lot of diligence, a lot of back channeling, a lot of questions. I'm one that believes you need to come with a prepared mind. I don't think that there's ever been a point in time where I've been able to show up on Sundays and I just show up on Sundays. That's just not humanly possible. There are some players that have that ability.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those players that can just show up on Sunday and everything is going to click on Sundays. So that ability to prepare, to work on that scouting report, to utilize that scouting report, to develop a game plan, to have some things that I want to accomplish, the things that I didn't do well in the last meeting or the last time that I was in this particular position. How do I better myself to be more qualified or more ready to tackle or to handle the situation at hand? But it's one of those things where it's coming with the prepared mind, coming prepared, and being as prepared or overly prepared for, a 15-minute meeting, a 30-minute coffee, a 45-minute lunch, an hour lunch. Because if you can't get past those introductory conversations, you can't get to that dinner or to that opportunity where somebody invites you to their home and allows you to spend time with their family or, asks you to come to their vacation home, what have you. It takes time to build up to those particular experiences. And, I'm built for it, but I also realize that it has to come with a lot of preparation that takes place prior to getting there. And it takes time and it compounds. The questions and the conversations that me and you are having and that we had this morning at breakfast in 2024 are completely different than the conversations that we had when we were running the streets in June of 17, which I remember very vividly. So things have changed quite a bit over the years, but you've had opportunity to compound on the things that you're excited about and the things that you're working on. And I've had opportunity to compound on what I'm trying to do in the right that I'm trying to earn to be in this particular industry. So it takes time.
I totally agree. I mean, some of your teammates were here, I think it was a few weeks ago, and one of them came up to me after and was thanking me and was like, well, what do I ask in those meetings? And I'll tell you the irony of that. I was at a board meeting 2 weeks ago and a founder, I wanted to make some intros to some go-to-market leaders. And he asked me the exact same question and then said, you know what? Before I actually ask you for those intros, give me 3 books that I should read and I will go read them. And after I read them and I know enough to be dangerous, that's when I'm down for the intro. And I feel like that is something that you've consistently brought to the table when you are going into meetings with people from a wide array of backgrounds.
Well, the thing is, and I hate to put it in this particular context, but I almost stalk them and stalk what they're doing on social, the books that they've been a part of, or the books that they've been quoted in, or articles that they've been quoted in. I go try to find as much information as humanly possible on them. So when I come to that particular meeting, I've done the work to earn an introduction from them or earn an introduction to somebody else. So instead of asking, what should I be asking? I've asked enough questions that's shown enough interest and curiosity in what they're doing, where they just want to help just because they've seen that I've put the work in. You'd be surprised how often people will help you when they've seen that you put in the work. And that's not a founder or athlete type of thing. I think that's something that comes from somebody's gut when they want to do the work to show that they've taken a keen interest in somebody else's journey. And when you've shown that interest in somebody else's journey, they will reciprocate that in their particular way, in whatever way that may be. You'd be surprised the different opportunities and the different doors that will be open just because of how curious or how keen you are to their particular journey.
It's hard to fake curiosity and it's hard to fake passion.
Without question.
So you had the opportunity to start your professional business career and go invest in anything. And you have invested in a wide array of things, including, I think, cattle, real estate, art. But you've decided to spend what I would say is most of your time investing in startups. Why invest in startups?
Yeah. I love being around people who want to break stuff. They want to break molds. They want to break down barriers. They want to fight, and they want to fight with their minds, fight with their hearts, fight with their souls. And it's something about the grit of starting from the bottom and starting from scratch that I really enjoy. But it also relates to, as a professional athlete, that you have to start from nothing and have to have a lot of delayed gratification to get to the point of substance of being able to, get a scholarship to go to college, being able to get drafted, being able to win the job or earn the job to be on the roster, earn the job to be a starter, earn the right to stay a starter, earn the right to be a Pro Bowler, earn the right to be an All-Pro. And if you were good enough, having the opportunity to be in the Hall of Fame. Like everything you had to earn it every single step of the way. Every milestone or every step that you took was something that you had to go and earn. And not everybody has that opportunity to be a All-Pro, to be a Pro Bowler, to be a Hall of Famer, or to win a Super Bowl, or to be an MVP in a Super Bowl, like, or to be an Offensive Player of the Year, or Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, what have you. Like, you had to earn the right to do that. And when you look at startups, founders, operators that may have been at a ripping company that came down and started something all over again, they have to start all over again from scratch of hitting those milestones over and over and over. And I enjoy being around that type of grit and that type of curiosity and that type of hunger. When I see you hustling more than I'm hustling, that means I got the ante up my game. Just like if I happen to see an offensive lineman that's doing it better than I do, I got to go find a way to up my game up. And I think for me, I'm attracted to that. And I think for me, that's why I've spent so much time at the early stage is I'm attracted to that hustle. I'm attracted to that grind. I'm attracted to that vision where you see something that nobody else sees. And you have the opportunity to go and make something from nothing.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think you've taken advantage of all of that on the field, but you've also taken advantage of it off the field too. You know, one of the things that I feel like a lot of people get jealous or upset about is when they look around the venture industry, there are a lot of people in VC that were born on third base. You know, they might have had wealth beforehand. They might have had a lot of connections. And you, being a professional athlete, now entering the investment world, in a way, you are starting on third base in terms of your ability to get into doors. But I think the important thing that people miss is the fact that you still need to run home.
Yeah.
You still need to send the email. You still need to ask for intros. You still need to be curious, and you still need to follow up, you know, and those are all things that you've done incredibly well over the years. And I feel like people should not forget that.
You know, I think the first rule, and Mike Tomlin says this, I hate to keep going back and forth from football to
that's
tech,
great.
but
We got to keep it going.
Mike Tomlin says the first rule of getting better is showing up. And even, you know, like you said, starting on third base in some respects as it pertains to the access that we as athletes have, is the stereotype for many athletes is that we don't show up. We don't show up in email. We don't show up in person. We don't show up over and over and over and over. If you look at any investor up and down the capital stack, literally up and down the capital stack, the best investors, the best asset allocators, they continue to show up over and over and over and over. And it's not somebody asking them to show up. They're showing up because they either believe in what they're going after, they believe in that particular company, they believe in that particular ecosystem. They've been called to go and win, and they have this thirst to want to go and kill everything that happens to be in front of them. Like, that is something that we as athletes have to do a much better job of is, yes, we get access, but are we willing to do the additional work that's required to earn the right to continue to have access? Okay, you get access on one deal. Oh, that's great. Whoop-de-doo. Hey, I want to be around this athlete and this female athlete, this track star, this football player, this basketball player, this soccer star, this F1 driver, what have you. But after the fizzle, what do you then bring to the table? What's the substance that you then bring to the table? And I've always prided myself on, can I actually impact your bottom line? Because at the end of the day, that's really all a founder really cares about. Okay, they got to come to a football game. You know, I invited people to games many times when I played here for the Jets, and I've done it, you know, did it in Pittsburgh, did it in Jacksonville, did it in Arizona. That's great. Hey, I had a great experience at the football game. Can you actually help put money in my pocket? And if you can do that, then that's where the magic really starts to compound, is if you can do that and then do it consistently over time. And again, compound it, just like any other investor. And it's not only doing it as an investor, but can you replicate it? Can you be consistent in that replication? And then can you sustain that replication and that consistency over time?
It's a long game.
It's a long game. It's a long game. Adrian Clem, one of my coaches, and I consider him a dear friend, almost like an older brother. He would say, Kelvin, anybody can make it to the National Football League. Anybody. If Jason Schumann wanted to make it to the National Football League, he can make it to the National Football League.
Would have been a great holder.
A great holder. Anybody can make it. The question is, can you stay in the National Football League?
How many offensive linemen are still in the league from when you got drafted?
I got a list on my desk, but I know one for sure, and that's Zeitler. Played for the Baltimore Ravens last year, played right guard. Now he's in Detroit, which another system that fits his mold. But I think it's maybe 2 or 3, and I may be missing one, but I know for sure Zeitler. Zeitler was up there.
And what pick in the draft were you again?
278. I was the last offensive lineman taken in the 2012 draft.
Yeah. You talked about adding to the bottom line.
Yeah.
You're investing more and more. The seed world's gotten so much more competitive.
Yep.
Why do I let Kelvin Beachum onto my cap table?
I listen, first and foremost. I want to listen to what you have going on. And then second, I want to go run really fast and execute on what you need. As simple as that. I'm not going to make this game super hard and say, hey, I have some proprietary way of getting you access, or I have this proprietary tool that I'm finding a way to add value. I listen to what you have to say. Hey, Kelvin, here are the customers that we're trying to get. And I love investor updates. Like that is, for me, that is where I get to play the game the best. Is I get an investor update. Literally this weekend, got an investor update from a company that's in the esports world. And they said, here are the 60 companies we're trying to get a meeting with. Boom, boom. I got 3 people I can make an intro over the weekend. I got one in NASCAR. I got one at a fintech company. And I got one in the food and beverage space. 3 intros over the weekend. Boom. In your inbox. Said founder, hey, I saw the investor update. Thanks so much. As long as you communicated with me, that gives me an opportunity to know exactly what you need. And I can go and execute on exactly what you need. I'm not going to say that I can do something I'm not Mr. Schwartzman. I'm not Egon Durbin. I'm not Robert Smith. I'm Kelvin Beachum. And I know the things that I can bring to the table, and I know the things that I can't bring to the table. I'm not Josh Kushner. I'm not Mamoon over at KP. I'm not Doug Leone. Like, there are things that they bring to the table that I can't bring. However, the things that I can bring to the table, go and execute on that. And the thing is I want to help the ecosystem at the end of the day. If I can help the ecosystem and I not get access to the cap table, that will come around at some point in time. So for me, it's about giving to the ecosystem, no matter if I'm able to get on the cap table or not. I go back to Frank Gans, I mentioned earlier, what you give will grow, what you keep, you lose.
I think it reminds me of, I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with the founder that I'm on her board, and we were out to dinner, and she asked me if I ever really get the chance to shut off. Same question you just asked me at breakfast. And, I told her, I said, well, I don't know how to answer that question. I can shut off when there's not people reaching out to me, but when founders need something, I'm there. And I think the reason why both of us are there is because we deeply care. And if you want to win and you deeply care and you have a lot of portfolio companies, it turns out you're going to be on the clock a lot of the time.
It's a dangerous combination, but that's what we signed up for. Many people ask, well, Kelvin, football has concussions and all this and that and the other. Injuries, it's 100% injury rate in the National Football League. That's just what it is. That's just what it is. I know what I signed up for.
Yeah.
It's the same thing within this ecosystem. If you happen to invest in a number of different companies, those companies have asked. There are things that you may be able to bring to that company. Yes, you're going to be on call quite a bit. This is a services business. It's a services business.
I mean, my favorite Kelvin Beachum story, at least from the last 12 months, is we get on a board meeting. I don't know, this was probably 3 months ago for a shared portfolio company. And you're the board observer and I'm the board member. And Kelvin's not on camera. And I'm like, how you doing, Kelvin? He's like, well, I'm on the training table right now. And I'm like, you're on the training table right now? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, I got to take care of both of my jobs. But you were 100% present, 100% present. And I think what's amazing is you just don't let things get in your way and you make sure that you make the time for whatever is necessary to do.
That is what my wife asks for all the time. And Jess all too well. But it is something that I deeply believe in, is that for me to earn the right to be on cap tables consistently with what I quote unquote do as my day job, which is a nice paying day job. This is what I want to do once I'm done. And I need to make sure that I'm putting in the reps, even with all the chaos that I'm going through right now, putting in the reps to show not only founders, not only you, people down the road that this is real business. This is, I'm in it for real. I'm not a tourist. I'm not just flying by and saying, hey, I'm an athlete who that happens to be investing, or a former athlete who happens to be. I am in this for real. And if I have to take a meeting on a massage table, which I've done, if I have to take a meeting on the treatment table, which I've done, if I have to take a meeting in the hot tub or the cold tub, which I've done, if I have to take a meeting in the hot box, which is a sauna, which I've done, if I have to take a meeting on the stretching table or getting an IV, then that is what's necessary for me to understand what's going on in the ecosystem, but also taking care of my body so I can be able to perform on Sundays. Because the thing is, there's 24 hours in a day for everybody. I just choose to use my 24 hours to, one, play football, and then during my free time, making sure that I'm doing everything that's humanly possible to help the companies that I've chose and that I've earned the right to not only be on their cap table, but they've also entrusted me to help their companies where I said that I would help those companies.
Let's talk a little bit more about investing. Do you think more professional athletes should be investing in startups?
I think more athletes should be spending the time to go and learn about what it takes to invest in startups, which is what we started out with. I mean, the books you sent me were Venture Deals by Brad Fell, Angel Book by Jason Calkinis. You introduced me to Jeff up there at HBS and I've been reading his books for years. Me and you started talking about portfolio construction and got David Swinson got his book on portfolio engineering, if I'm not mistaken. I literally still have, and I actually have it in a folder on my desk, the investor checklist that you gave me and the investment memo that you were using back in 2017, which I still use to date. So for me, it's taking the time to go and learn about the industry, and then also taking the time to learn about the history behind the industry.
So important.
Are you willing to go and study the history behind, what's going on in the ecosystem? Are you willing to go study the history behind how KKR was created, how Silver Lake was created? You think about a lot of these spin-outs. Me and you were talking about Renaissance earlier this morning. Literally when I got to your spot this morning at 5:50, the conversations were endless about a number of things that we hadn't had a chance to talk about, but we were talking about Renaissance Technologies this morning in one of the podcasts that I need to listen to about Renaissance Technology. So it's this ability for athletes, I feel, the same way in which we learn about the histories behind our game, whether that be football, basketball, baseball, hockey, NASCAR, F1, tennis, what have you. Take the time to also go learn about the histories behind the markets and the ecosystems that you want to be in. So for me, it's studying the private markets. And by studying the private markets, it's allowed me to be informed about where capital is flowing, who's managing that capital. Even at the earliest stages, where are these pockets of capital? Where are these founders and these little mini mafias spending time at? Where are these cohorts of people that spend time with each other? And how do those cohorts move in conjunction with one another? Are they aiding other businesses? Are they aiding the ability for these partnerships to take place as these companies are starting to scale? Instead of, the conversation around unicorns, what's producing the decacorns? Why are those decacorns being created? Who created those decacorns? Where did they come from? Not so much, the school, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, what have you, but where are the pockets of capital and where did they source these pockets of capital? Within which firms or within which companies did these folks spin out at? How did these founders come together? Why did they come together? What history did they have before they came together? Those are the things that I think most about. And for me, what are most fascinating about this industry, because once you have the time to learn about the history, I can tell you what tree Mike T that was in the Tampa 2 defense when he was in Tampa. From Tampa, before Tampa, he was in Minnesota. So you can see the throughput of where he came. From an offensive lineman standpoint, one of my favorite coaches was Mike Munchak. Mike Munchak was in the air raid offense when he was playing blocking for Warren Moon back in the late. I'm literally like, it can go, I can take you back the history of all these different coaches and how their decisions that they make today are informed by the decisions that and the trees that they came from. Ty Bowles, who I had as a head coach in New York, came from the Parcells tree.
Man, the big tuna.
The big tuna. You know what I'm saying? So I can walk you through different histories within our game, and those can inform exactly how decisions are made, how a team is built, how an organization is constructed. The Pittsburgh Steelers, 3 head coaches over the last 60 to 70 years, Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. Why is that the case?
Success breeds success.
New England. I mean, I know, but it's one of those things like, why are these entities successful? And those entities, you can pull those entities and pull them out and be able to extrapolate the histories and how those histories inform the decisions that they're making today. I know that was a long-winded question, but long-winded answer rather.
It's spot on though. I think the 2 keys there are ultimately, one, like we just said, success breeds success. The other is that in order to be successful in the venture world, you need to go figure out where are all of the chess pieces. Yeah. And if you can figure out where all the chess pieces are and which of those trees has created great cultures and incredible talent pools and ambitious, fast-moving, hard-charging people who want to learn and want to build big businesses, then you're more likely to be successful because you're going to find the best people to invest in. And that's what you've really done. And speaking of, I think, investments, I just want to touch on a quick story. I think there was, and you mentioned diversification.
Yeah.
Diversification is really important. We talked about portfolio construction in the very early days of working together. And I did say you listened to me, but there was one time that you didn't. And I'm glad that you didn't, because I think I would have cost you about $1 million. What's the story there?
Oh, man. We were talking about portfolio construction early on in my angel investing journey. And there was a company, I don't know if the camera can catch that on my wrist or not.
Whoop.
And, we were talking about making sure that, if I were deploying checks, that the checks were in a sizable amount. So as I was thinking about the entire portfolio construction, that I didn't have more concentration in a particular company as it related to the entire portfolio. 2017, there was just as we, got connected, there was a Super Bowl down in Houston, and there were a couple of companies that pitched at the NFLPA pitch day. I remember sitting next to Ruse, who is currently one of the GPs at Catapult. At the time, he was at Kleiner running a lot of hardware, and a gentleman by the name of Deepin, who's one of the GPs at Courtside Ventures. And there was this young founder. I mean, I don't want to say young, but I think we're around the same age. This guy, Will.
He was young. You guys were both in your late 20s.
Yeah, at the time. And Will Ahmed was raising.
He was post-seed at that point?
Yeah. I mean, they had raised some capital. Yeah. Raised some capital. And I loved what he was doing and building at the time, because I was a huge proponent, especially as data was starting to come into sports more. I wanted to be a part of the value creation instead of just being the talent in which Whoop would put their sensor on. So I'm like, all right, well, this is going to be happening in our game at some point. Data is going to be collected on us in a very sizable manner, which it is. I mean, we got data on our shoes, we got sensors on our shoes, sensors on our helmets, sensors on our helmet, shoulder pads, etc. If you're going to be collecting data on me, why can't I also participate in the value creation of this data that you're going to be collecting?
It's very 50 Cent of you.
And had the opportunity to go and spend time with Will right after he finished pitching, started to build a relationship with him. And I didn't ask Jason, because we were in this kind of
portfolio
system.
Construction agreement.
Yes. And I bucked the system quite a bit and put in a very sizable check in relation to the allocation of the money that we said we were going to be investing in this asset class. And, he came back and he was stern. Kelvin, why did you put so much into this company? And I was like, I had conviction that this was going to be legit. And,
Like Warren Buffett once said that you should have only a few good ideas in the course of your career, and you should put all your money behind it.
I wish I would have put more behind it in retrospect, but I did put a very sizable check into the company. It's done extremely well. I've had an opportunity to spend time with Will. I've seen many athletes that have come into that company since then. Russell Okung was one of the other individuals that was in before me, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been cool to see a company like that rip and also, take the world by storm, especially as it relates to the data, the information, the psychology, the behavior analysis.
All the anxiety it creates.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. If you want to get better, Whoop is for you. I put it that way.
No
plug for Whoop.
That's a good line, though.
But if you want to get better, Whoop is for you. If you want to find ways to push your body, hold yourself accountable, that's the way. And Whoop does a really good job of holding you accountable.
I feel like from my side of the story, I remember we went over portfolio construction. You and I both met with Will. We did a pitch together, and I remember at the time, Whoop was pitching the idea that Whoop data would be on television, and
which it did.
Is it now?
Yes.
It doesn't show your sleep score though.
No. It doesn't show sleep score. It shows real time strain, and they did that a couple years ago with I think it was Roy McIlroy did it. I can't remember if it was a Masters or U.S. Championship, one of the two.
So I remember being like, Will's really special. This is super interesting. When you want to bet on consumer products, you probably want to go either to the ultra high end or the very, very low end.
And we had to debate that. I didn't think it was a consumer facing product, but keep going.
Yes. Then you called me and you were like, all right, I'm thinking about doing this deal. And I was like, well, do you want to do it or not? And then if so, if you want to do it, then we should talk about sizing. And you're like, well, actually, I already did it.
and I wire capital.
And I was like, oh man, having worked with a few other athletes, I was like, man, I thought Kelvin was really good. Now he might be a little bit challenging to work with here. But I mean, one of the interesting things is Whoop is probably one of the few consumer companies that you've backed. Why are B2B companies better for professional athletes to invest in?
I wouldn't say that they're better. I just feel personally that I've had more success backing more B2B type companies. And this is no disrespect to the investors that have done a lot of consumer facing companies that have done well. But I think, for me, when I look at where my best returns have come, they've come from businesses that are either selling to other businesses or selling to enterprise and large enterprise customers at the end of the day. And for me, I just find that is something that I enjoy because I get to see something that's repeatable, that's consistent. I can see emotion that happens to take place. And for me, I just haven't had a lot of success on the consumer facing front.
Let me reframe that. Why will Kelvin Beachum and a professional athlete add more value to a B2B company than a consumer company?
If you look at every NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB stadium, and you look in the Raptors and you see all the different sponsors that are in and around those stadiums, if you as an athlete cannot go and make one ask to one of those companies that are on the stadiums that you're playing in, the courts that you're entertaining on, then I think there is something that we as athletes need to go and reassess about ourselves and our ability to be able to help not only ourselves, but also the companies that we choose to back in some shape, form, or fashion. So I feel that the resources that are around us lend the opportunity to be able to have a very interesting, organic, and real-time dialogue with the people that are in the suites looking down on us as we're playing and entertaining on a consistent basis.
There you go. So I want to shift gears for a second. Kelvin, you're from Mejia, Texas. I pronounced that correctly,
yeah.
Right? Population 6,893, according to the last census. Median income for a household in the city is $22,785. Median income for a family just south of $30K. 22% of people below the poverty line. If you could snap your fingers tomorrow to help more kids from Mejia end up with a mindset like you, what would you do?
The mindset is something that I feel has only happened due to exposure, to be honest with you. The more I've been exposed to, the more I've traveled, the more I realized what's possible. And anytime I go back home, I try to inform young people that there's nothing wrong with staying in Mejia, but it's a much bigger world that's out there. And for me, if a young person in my head wants to be able to see what the world has to offer, you have to get out. Football was my way out, being honest. Football was the way out. Now, I had to have academics to be able to accomplish being on, a roster there at SMU. But football was the way out. And once I realized that football was the way out, I leaned in and I ran with it. And once I realized that football begets access, I took that and I ran with it. And once I realized that access begets other access, and realized that once I get to the National Football League, that I have the entire globe to be able to leverage due to the NFL Shield, I took that and I ran with it.
We've talked a lot about exposure, one-on-one.
Yep.
Do you think exposure is the key to improving diversity in tech?
Without question. Without question. You can't be something you don't see. And I look at some of the greats in and around corporate finance. We're here in New York, and I look around some of the greats, the Ray Maguires, the Bill Lewis, the Ken Chenaults, the Fred Terrells, the Clarence Otis, Robert Frank Smiths, Chris Lees, Vern Perry, Ryan Neese. I mean, the list goes on and on. Those are diverse individuals that are in the corporate finance world. And when they were doing what they were doing, there weren't many examples. And I think if you look at this new batch of individuals, we've had people to look up to within corporate finance and within venture and private equity, where this is possible. Aaron and Namdi over at 645, Ken Chenault Jr. over at Benstreth, Kanye over at Kindred, Richard Kirby, Kai Bond over at Courtside, Kobe, over at Upfront, Adina over at Khosla. Now, I want to see more women, to be honest with you. But Adina over at Khosla is doing amazing things. Mercedes Dent, Megan, who used to be over at GC, Chelsea Taylor over at GGV, which I think they just been renamed. I think that firm is
Notable Capital.
Notable Capital. But now we have the ability to look towards where the world can be, seeing what Melody Hobson and Condoleezza Rice and Leslie Robertson over at Benstreth, and seeing the journeys of where things can be and what is possible. That exposure that we now see lends itself to the ability for things to happen for the younger generation. But if you look at that older generation that I just mentioned at the onset, there were not many examples. There's a book entitled "Why Do the White Boys Get to Have All of the Fun?" Like, that is opportunity, and there was an opportunity for many diverse individuals to see that it's possible to be in this ecosystem. And what does it actually look like to perform, to put ourselves in those positions to be successful? Because again, you mentioned, Kelvin, you started on third base. There is a part of me that still feels like I have to go and beat down the door. That's why I wear boots, man. Sometimes I got to kick the door down, and I have no problem with doing so. Doing it politely.
Yeah, but it's an important mindset to have.
It is. But to your question, it's the exposure and the ability to see what's out there. And if you don't see what's out there, and like if I wouldn't have known what Ryan Neese and Ronnie Lott and Harris Barton and Steve Young and Brett Jones and Joe Montana were doing for athletes that were transitioning into this ecosystem, I wouldn't have known that this was possible.
It kind of follows the idea that every human being wants to find another human being that is older than them, that has paved the path before them, to try to follow that path and that journey. And the more that people get exposed to the content that people like you create, and a number of the folks that you mentioned, I feel like the younger generation will be better off, because that North Star doesn't start when you're 25 usually. It's better if it starts when you're 5.
Oh, without question.
Or 10.
Yes.
And so you've gotten pretty heavily involved in STEM. How do you think that plays a role?
Well, it gives young people the example that if you want to go be a neuroscientist, you have the ability to go do so. If you want to be a physicist or a biologist or a software engineer or a founder or an entrepreneur, you have the ability to do that. However, there are some skills that are needed to be successful in this particular industry. And in this particular industry is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, if you're going to be in any of those industries, in and around those particular ecosystems, you need to be proficient in some of those areas. And I say this all the time, and I've told you this a number of times. I got to find a lawyer to help me trademark this at some point in time. Everybody can go pro in football. Everybody can go pro in STEAM. And I firmly believe that, because if you're thinking about wealth creation, which at the end of the day, somebody in this building in some shape, form, or fashion is thinking about wealth creation, I feel for the generation that I'm in, mid-30s and below, the way in which to participate in this particular ecosystem is going to be done with proficiencies in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And if you have those competencies, you have the ability to accomplish some amazing things.
I think about something that my partner Rebecca taught me, which is like when people aren't doing well, you have to unpack one of three things. They either don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, or they don't know why they're doing it. Yeah. And in what we're talking about with exposure creates the what do I maybe want to do? Yeah. STEM creates the how do I do it? Yes. And then following in that journey, it's more of an internal dialogue of why do you want to go do it? And yes. I think that the things that we're discussing here is just so important and doesn't just start here in New York City, but it starts in the country, in Mahia. Every place has the birth and the opportunity to birth something into the ecosystem. And, I would say at 205 West Walnut Street there in Mahia, Texas, Kelvin and Coletta did a really good job of birthing the opportunity to go and survive. Their biggest thing was, I'm going to teach you how to survive. And I think I took it a step further, and I've taught myself how to thrive. And I'm teaching my kids. It's not about surviving now. Your grandparents taught us how to survive. Mm-hmm. We're at a position now where I'm going to teach you how to thrive. I got my daughter right now that every day she's working in Duolingo, working on 2 different languages. When you show me that it's complete, you get $2. She's working on 2 languages. One is Spanish and the other is Mandarin. I'm going to teach you how to thrive. I've told her already, if you can't write your acceptance letter into colleges in Mandarin, I've failed you as a father, because I've now heard and seen some of the experiences from others in and around this ecosystem that how do you put your child in a much different position to thrive in today's economy and thrive in today's global economy? So I'm teaching my kids how to thrive. So it's not me just telling you what I think should happen. I'm actually implementing it into my children's life so they can be much better off than their dad was. And not trying to make it easier for them. I'm actually trying to find ways to make it harder for them, because I don't want brats. I don't want entitled kids. So I make it very, very hard. I'm very anal about certain things in my home because I want them to realize that, yes, you have things that you got your own room. I didn't have my own room. I didn't have my own room till college. So there's going to be some things that I have very, very high expectations for. But I think those types of characteristics were the things that my parent instilled in me. And I want to find a way to instill that to make sure that my kids are not just surviving, but finding ways to thrive. Man, you jumped the gun. I was going to ask you, how do you keep your kids hungry at this point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I find all kinds of crazy stuff to make sure that, every day that they walk in, I want that mudroom to be immaculately clean. You have 2 shoes and 1 pair of sandals. That's for everybody in the house every day. That stack of shoes should be nice and neat, paired up together. Your room should be immaculate every time I come. If I walk into that room and that room is not immaculate when I walk in, meaning your bed is made to the T.
It's going to be trouble.
It's going to be trouble. It's going to be trouble. And my kids understand that. My wife, we parent together and we push our kids together. The thing is, when we came up, grades were A's, B's, C's, D's, etc. Now it's like average, good, satisfactory. I'm like, I don't
participation.
I don't know what that is. Excellence is the only thing that matters. So if anything is that's coming home isn't excellence, if the way in which you color, my son happened to look in his folder. He had they have, when you color, they have like words that mean a certain color, and you can, it turns out to a beautiful picture. He happened to scribble on it, and I said, Kelvin, K3, he's named after his father. I better not ever see a paper ever done like that again. You make sure that those colors match what you're doing on that piece of paper. You outline those colors, and then you color in the right way. He brought me that paper back, and it looked like a piece of art, looked like a masterpiece. That's what it's supposed to look like. Every time, consistency, repeatability, sustainability. The same things that I have to preach to myself to be able to earn the right to an allocation into these companies. These are the same principles that I'm instilling in my children. Yes, they have a little better than I do, and have a little better than I did. But this is the things that we're working on, is make sure you color in that paper the right way, because I want that to be excellent. So as you start to do and build on bigger habits and better habits and bigger projects down the line, that you're doing it with excellence.
It's a way to go about your day-to-day. It's awesome, man. Well, appreciate you joining me. Thanks for coming to New York and being an incredible guest.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.